Hello and good morning. So, like I promised you last night on Instagram, I have been, like many yoga teachers, uh, thinking about how best I can serve my students, both those in Altea and farther afield, during this coronavirus lockdown here in Spain. The first thing, of course, I think we should all do is wish a speedy recovery and peace and health to everyone who's affected, not only by coronavirus, but by all illness. In fact, our vulnerability and our mortality are things that really link us together as humans. It's an intrinsic part of the human experience to be aware that our time is limited. And in fact, in the Yoga Sutras, that is one of the first things that Patanjali identifies, is this shared fear that we have. And so to mitigate the worst effects of that fear, of course, he recommends the Eightfold Path of Yoga. So what I'm going to talk about today is number 4 in Ashtanga Yoga, which is Pranayama. So Pranayama arrives after the ethical part, which is yamas and niyamas. After asana, we get pranayama, and it arrives before meditation, before dharana and dhyana. So we consider that the breath is the link between the body and the mind. And what modern science is really showing us is that in fact this is the case. Many of us have heard about this wonderful vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve. It's a nerve that is part of the central nervous system, and it exits the brain. It comes down into the neck and throat region, and then from there it branches off, wanders all around the body, and innervates various internal organs. Now, as it has to pass from the upper body to the lower body, it has to pass through our little dividing line, which is our diaphragm. And the diaphragm is a muscle, so that means it has contractile fibers, it has some tendons, and it also has some holes in it, and these holes are called foramen, and these holes allow various tubes and other things to go from the top to the bottom. So things like the thoracic ducts of the lymphatic system have to cross the diaphragm. The esophagus, so the tube where your food goes down, has to cross the diaphragm. And actually, in the same hole that your esophagus passes through, your vagus nerve passes through. And the vagus nerve doesn't only take information from the brain to the internal organs, it takes information from the internal organs and back to the brain. And so that's really where we work. First of all, we want to relax the diaphragm, because if a nerve is a bit squeezed by a tight diaphragm, nerves don't like to be squeezed. They very quickly start to get overexcited, and they start to transmit messages that maybe are a little bit exaggerated, put it that way. They're terrible gossips, these nerves. And so a tight diaphragm could possibly contribute to a tight vagus nerve, which could possibly have a knock-on effect in your central nervous system, okay? So we work on relaxing the diaphragm. We work on the rhythmic movement of the diaphragm. This is very important for calming your body down. We have lots of rhythms in our body. Most of us are only aware of our heart rhythm. In fact, the lymphatic system has a pulsation rhythm. The central nervous system is able to pulsate at different rhythms. And, well, basically there are various things that are going on inside there. And one of the big rhythms of our body is our breathing rhythm. So, most people, if you sort of tell them, breathe quietly in and out through your nose, most people have a slightly longer inhale than exhale. And some people have a much longer inhale than exhale. They sort of go. And if you think about what's happening, when you're having, say, a panic attack, or you're crying, you're very, very emotional, your breath is extremely altered in those emotional states. So, for example, a person who's having a panic attack, and the same thing happens if you're crying. So we see that emotion changes the breath. Ergo, the breath can change the emotion. But very few of us are able to talk to our own minds or our own physical brains directly. Very few of us can say, okay, brain, now I want you to be in theta. Same thing holds true for the heart. Very few of us are actually able to say, hey heart, slow down. But everyone can control their breath. And by controlling the breath, we can make changes in your central nervous system. And one of the changes that happens is your heart rate and your heart rate variability, which is the difference between the acceleration on the inhale and the deceleration on the exhale. These things are changed by breath. So we have to know how to breathe. And so this will be my first video in a series. In a second, I'll show you some of the more technical sides of breathing, but have a think about what I've said and check back later. Oh.